Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today I have an easy oil painting tutorial for you. We're going to paint this scene of 3 cherries in a white bowl on a white table using brand new Geneva oil paints. They're our sponsor today. They are a brand new oil paint company that only has 6 colors in its collection. The colors are pure and wonderful and so easy to mix for vivid, bright, clean results. And I'm going to show you how I did that in today's tutorial. So let's go to the table and I'll show you how it's done.
Okay, here's my workstation. I'm using a piece of laminated cardboard for my palette, and as you can see, I just have a tiny little bit of paint in each of my colors. Now this is how the Geneva paint comes. It's in kind of like a little canning jar. The first time you open it, it is a little hard to get the lids off, but then they go on and off easy after that. So when you begin, you want to stir your paint to make sure it's of an even consistency. It's kind of like a face cream. You see that there? And then I'm using a popsicle stick so I don't get too much, and I'm just going to put a little bit on my makeshift palette there because a little bit goes a long way, I realized, with this paint. So see, just like a tiny little dollop of paint there. Very, very easy to work with. I decided I'd put a little more white because there was a lot of white in this picture, and come to find out I didn't even need all that. So, you know, just kind of keep that in mind. Take out a little bit because you're probably not going to need that much. The sketch I'm using is 3 cherries in a saucer, and I found that on Paint My Photo, and I'll put a link in the video description. The photo's by Lee Pierce, and here I'm just mixing up a little of the ultramarine blue and burnt umber to get a nice gray. The kit comes with black, but I personally don't like to use black in my paintings, so that's why I'm mixing my own gray. I know I'll be using those other colors throughout the piece. I have sped up the painting because oil painting takes me a lot longer than watercolors. This painting took me a little over an hour to complete, so I just wanted to make sure I didn't bore anybody with the you know, an hour-long painting. Plus my kids were running around and it was very loud in the background. I'm painting any of the little shadows that I see, and now I'm adding some white to my brush, and I am adding that to the painting as well. I thought my shadows needed to be a little cooler, so that's why I added a little bit more blue. And since I'm mixing my gray, I have that flexibility. You don't always have that flexibility when you're using like a mixed gray or a mixed black, so that's why I like to mix my own. Plus I know that all my colors will be in harmony. Now the Geneva introductory set contains 6 colors. I'm using 5 of them minus the black, as I mentioned, and it's nice because you can mix everything and your colors will be in harmony because you're not adding anything weird and discordant, so everything's just gonna go together and gonna match, which is nice. So here, as I'm going around and adding the white, I'm trying to keep the shadows that I've already put in there, and then I've grabbed a larger, softer nylon brush. The previous one was a small hog brush, and I'm just kind of softening my brush strokes out a little bit. I'm kind of going more for a soft, realistic look rather than a impressionistic look. I switched to a small, soft nylon brush. It's kind of stiffer than like the nylon brushes you'd use for watercolor, and I mixed some of the cad yellow and the red, and I've made kind of like a peachy orange color, and that's going to be the lighter spots on my cherries. So I'm going in and adding that anywhere I see a hint of that color in my painting. Now I'm wiping my brush off with a rag, and I'm going in with the pure red. Now I'm using a dirty brush. I've just wiped off the extra paint. Now the Geneva paints are a solvent-free method of painting, but you're still getting traditional oils. In the past I've used water mixable oils a lot because I didn't want to deal with the solvents for cleanup. This allows you to use actual real oils but still avoid the solvents in the studio, which is really nice. I do prefer the buttery consistency of this paint over my water mixable oils, and it's just an extra bonus that I don't have to get the solvents out. And by wiping your brush off and using the dirty brush, you kind of keep that harmony going and those lovely blends throughout your painting. Since the colors are so pure, you shouldn't run into the problem of making mud unless you're really trying to. So here I'm just kind of filling in the areas with my red. I'm not really trying to blend at this point. I mean, some of it is, but I'm really just trying to block in my color. For the darkest shadows, I'm going to wipe off my brush so that, again, I'm still using the dirty brush, but it's not going to have too much yellow in it. And I'm taking the ultramarine and the red, mixing it together to make kind of a deep purple, but it's not going to look vivid purple because there's still some of the sedimentary color on my brush and on my painting. So I'm going in and adding those darkest darks wherever I see them from the photo. Now, my recommendation, if you want to paint this painting, which I hope you try it because it's a really satisfying painting to do, I recommend you watch the tutorial through and then you go find the reference photo, which I've linked in the video description, and then you can paint along with me or you can paint it at your own. I think once you watch it through, you'll have a really good idea on how to paint this. Now I want to work on the background, so I've switched to a about a 1/2 inch bright, which a bright is a flat brush, but it's got shorter bristles. And I've mixed some of the ultramarine and the burnt umber again together to make my gray, and I'm adding white to that, and I'm just kind of mixing and adding it to the paper, to the canvas as I go. Oh, by the way, the size of the canvas I'm using is 8 by 10. Now the reason I'm doing the background now is because I know those stems, I'm going to want to paint those on top and not have to try to go around them for the background. So you kind of work back to front a little bit when you're doing oils or acrylics, actually, since they are more of an opaque medium rather than watercolor. So here I'm just adding a little bit more in the shadow because I felt like I lost it. And also, once you start to get your other objects in your painting, you start to get a better idea of what your values should be. I started off with my shadow a little light. I needed to have a little bit more contrast after seeing those red berries there. I grabbed a little more white. Just because I needed a little bit more to cover the background, and I'm just kind of filling in here with the bright brush. After I got the background in, I took a fan brush and I softened it. So I just basically dusted over it with the fan brush to give it a more smooth look. I have several fan brushes. The Bristle one is not going to give me as smooth of a look, but it will push my paint a little bit more. This softer hairbrush will give me more of a kind of airbrushed look, and anywhere I got my shadows kind of moved around too much, I'm going in with that same bright that I was using before and just redefining my shadow areas. Now I'm using an angular brush with just some paint on the pointy tip, and I am just redefining the edge of my plate now that I have my background all defined and blended. Now I'm using a smaller brush to define the edge of my plate and add some high highlights. You can do that anywhere you want that little bit of sparkle on the edge of your plate. I discovered that I really enjoyed using synthetic brushes with the Geneva paint. It has a creamy consistency that can be moved and manipulated really well with the synthetics. Here I'm just kind of brightening up with a little more yellow on some of the cherries, redefining my values and making them look a little bit more realistic. I've always found in the past that synthetic brushes didn't have the oomph to move my oils, but this paint moves beautifully with the synthetics, and I feel like I can use a lot less paint and still get the look I'm going for. So there's a tip if you're using these paints for the first time. Try your softer brushes. They're going to perform quite well for you. I'm starting to add in some white here to these cherries, and what I'm putting in is the cast reflection. So what happens here is your light bounces off the plate and then is reflected onto the cherry. So it's kind of weird because you're probably thinking, well, wouldn't there be a shadow there? But you're getting this bounced light on the glossy surface of the cherry. So you want to be a little conservative when you put these highlights in, because white is a very strong color and it can overpower your picture very easily. So just do that with a bit of caution. Now I'm using a very soft flat brush to go in and soften my colors, blend them very gently. It's going to give them kind of like an airbrushed look, and I'm wiping my brush off between every stroke pretty much. Anytime you see that brush go off camera, it's being wiped on a paper towel. Now it's time to paint the stems. I'm using some of the cadmium yellow and a little bit of that French ultramarine, mixing it together to make kind of like a sap green color, and I am painting in my stems. Now you'll notice I look really light there on the painting because my paint is mixing in with what I had underneath. Don't fret about that. We're going to kind of adjust our values in a little bit. We just want to kind of map out a place for the stems right now. That's a wonderful thing about oils, is you can keep going back in and adjusting. Now these paints will take 7 days to dry, and they're all going to dry at the same consistency. So unlike other oil paints where you might have your brown dry really quick and your yellows might be wet for a while, everything is going to dry at a uniform rate, which is nice. So I am just also adding some brown into the ends of the stem where it's kind of where the cherry would be attached to the tree or other cherries, and you've got that thicker area of the stem. And I'm adding that brown into the kind of bottom of the stem where it pushes into the fruit, just to give it that little bit of depth. Now you can go and you can fuss and play with these stems quite a bit. I really warn you not to fuss too much with your painting, because that's when mud happens. I felt like my shadows under the cherries were not deep enough and did not accurately show the weight of the cherries. So what I've done is mixed a darker bit of gray, and I'm adding that under the cherries so that I can get that more weighty shadow. And then I'm just going in with a small soft paintbrush and blending the edges. And I kind of lost my shadow up there, so I'm adding that in. And I'm using the same brush I used for the stem. And here's a little trick. I added a little bit of red to that because I had green on my brush, and added that right into the shadow color because I knew that the shadow on the plate would have a little bit of red in it. Even though you may not be able to perceive it just by looking at it on camera here, it does. Any color, especially when you're looking with reflective surfaces, is going to have the color surrounding it in the shadows. I needed a little bit more blue there, and I didn't want to open up a jar, so I just took a little bit left off my stir stick, and that was plenty for the picture. That blue is nice and strong, and just a little touch of it really darkens up my shadows nicely. I'm adding the shadow from the stems, and again, just softening it a little bit with a soft paintbrush. I also wanted to have some fuzzy shadows from the stems on the table itself, but they wouldn't be as sharp as the stems on the plate because there's more distance between the cherry stem and the table as opposed to the plate, so that shadow is going to get diffused. So what I've done was I just quickly painted in the shadows on the table, and now I'm using that soft brush to soften out the shadows and diffuse them to give it that really natural look. That's how you get depth in your picture, guys. Just use your eyeballs to look at your reference and observe the world around you, even when you're not painting, and you will understand where shadows go and why they behave the way they do. I have to admit, this part is my favorite part of the painting, and it's adding the shiny reflections to things. It reminds me of, like, making cupcakes and putting the sprinkles on top. It really makes your painting come alive and have that three-dimensional look. And, glossy cherries look so nice with that little bit of highlight. I'm using a small, soft nylon brush, and the reason I'm using nylon is because it's so soft, it's not going to disturb the paint underneath. I also find it's easy to turn my canvas as I'm working so that I can get in there at a comfortable angle, and I don't try to force my brush in a way that is unergonomic, because that's when you end up with wobbly lines and mistakes. So keep that in mind when you're working. For the highlights that aren't super bright, like there on kind of the clefts of each side of the cherry, I'm just not having so much paint on my brush and just kind of softly blending them in. Now notice how that highlight just kind of pulls the cherry up off the plate and makes it look three-dimensional. I also like to tip my painting while I'm working so I can see that it looks all right without the glare. I am just doing a little final touches with blending my background with a fan brush. And I just need to add the bright high highlights on my picture, and I'm going to be just about done. Now it's time to refine the stems. It's kind of the last bit of this painting, and I'm using just different shades of white. Pretty much just a little bit of white can pull the highlights out of that stem if you have enough paint underneath. If not, you might mix a little bit of that light peach color into the end of the stem. Really look at the picture, which I'll put in the link in the video description, and see what colors you see when you're painting. Your eyes will not steer you wrong if you really paint what your eyes see. And speaking of that, if you are looking for some really great realistic oil painting tutorials, the inventor of Geneva paint has a website called drawmixpaint.com. His name is Mark Carter, and he has some wonderful realism tutorials in oils and Q&A videos and stuff, and I think you'd really enjoy his website. I'll put a link to that in the video description as well, so you can check it out. And I've put a little bit of burnt umber shadows. If you don't feel like your burnt umber shadows are dark enough, you can add a little bit of ultramarine to that and really make those shadows pop. And I'm just going in with some pure red and just adding a little bit of a punch of color anywhere I think it needs it. And this painting is done. I hope you enjoyed today's oil painting tutorial. If you'd like more information about the oil paints I used, please visit genevafineart.com. I used the introductory set, but they also have the colors available in individual bottles. You can find more information in the video description with easy, clickable links. I hope you give this a try. It was so much fun. I really enjoy painting with you today. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting!